I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Minakhimes. All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Mike Kadlick, Tayler Kyles here for CLNS Media outside a very rainy Gillette Stadium ahead of preseason game number 2 between the Patriots and the Eagles. Pregame show here. Look, Taylor, I'll start it off here. Well, first of all, we're powered by Game Time and Prize Picks. Head over to each place. Code CLNS. You'll get your deals over there. You'll hear from those guys later on in the show. I want to say quickly, last week we did this show in front of the field. It was a little bit sunnier. It was less doom and gloom. And there was a lot of excitement in the air. It was, first preseason game. We're going to see Drake May. There's rookies here. Today, I think I'm just nervous. I think the weather's making me nervous. The performance on Tuesday is making me nervous. It's almost like, all right, let's kind of get this thing over with after what we saw at Tuesday's practice. Tuesday's practice is turning into a nightmare, and I think you kind of tempered it a little bit last night. We were talking about the Judon when we did our emergency podcast last night, where all right, let's take a step back and let's kind of reset this thing. But man, Tuesday was ugly. They trade Judon. What are your thoughts right now, again, as the rain basically pours on top of us where we had to switch the set ahead of tonight's game? Like, overall thoughts before we get into everything else. What are you looking for, and kind of what are your thoughts?
So when it comes to how the Patriots can potentially respond to the Eagles practice, I'm thinking back to last season when they had joint practice with the Packers. The first day, the Patriots looked pretty terrible. The Packers pretty decisively won that day. There was a little pushback from New England, but it was pretty obvious that the Packers walked off as the better team. The second day, the Patriots walked onto that field and dominated. You had Jabril Peppers talking shit from the sidelines, calling the Packers soft. It was pretty interesting. Now, the pregame obviously went a little more back and forth, but the Patriots went to the drawing board, looked at the film, saw what they did wrong in the first joint practice, and came out in the second and had a much better day. That's what I think the team is hoping for tonight. The Eagles practice, for the offense specifically, was not good. They started off pretty strong, and then it just kind of fell off the cliff. But they have the film. They can see the things that they did poorly against an opponent that they're going to be seeing once again. So you're hoping that you're not going to get a repeat, dreadful performance like we did see in the tail end of their last joint practice. But at the end of the day, with Drake May playing more time in these sloppy conditions, that's really what worries me the most, I think, is I mentioned earlier today on Twitter that the film was hard to really evaluate last week because the quality of opponent, first of all, but also because of the weather conditions. Receivers couldn't run full speed. Javon Baker even mentioned there was a route that he ran that was nearly intercepted, where he was saying he was just trying to get into his route because it was so slippery on the field. Looking at the offense, the defense, even the quarterbacks, you could see that everybody was affected by the weather, and now it's pouring down right now. I don't know if or when this is going to slow up, so that gives me some worry because you're going to have, according to Albert Breer's report, you're going to see Jacoby Brissett in the first quarter. You're going to see Drake May from the second going into the third. You're just hoping they can actually get some quality reps, which may not be possible because I don't know how this field is going to dry up by 7 o'clock.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. We'll get into, that quarterback stuff you just mentioned. We'll get into some players to watch and final thoughts and really the game as we get on into the show. But before we do, let's kind of quickly close the book and give some closing thoughts on the Matthew Judon trade. Patriots, I assume if you're watching this, but if you don't, Patriots trade Matthew Judon, their star edge rusher, to the Atlanta Falcons last night for a 2025 third-round pick, and it felt like a win, for both parties. I think everybody kind of didn't think they would get up to a third-round pick for him. Before, I want to talk about, Kyle Brandt from Good Morning Football kind of went on a rant following what's going on with the Patriots here. I want to get your thoughts on that in a second, but first and foremost, it was reported, in the aftermath of the trade by the Athletics' Jeff Howe, that the Falcons as well as the Chicago Bears were involved in a potential trade for Matthew Judon, and that they both offered a third-round pick. And Howe reported that in trading with the Falcons, they essentially thought that the Falcons would be worse than the Bears this year. The Bears would be better. They would get the better pick through Atlanta. We had a conversation off the air, and I kind of said, well, I look at it as them looking for the worst pick. And Taylor, you kind of said that it could be doing right by Judon. I thought there was no way. I think the way that the Judon situation unfolded here, it's like, well, who really cares? Do best by the team, and if he doesn't want to go to Atlanta, so what? we kind of had more of a conversation. You can kind of explain that further. Your thoughts, your thinking on the Atlanta versus Chicago thing and, what the trade compensation ended up being in return.
Yeah, so my initial thought was that the Falcons, obviously having a veteran quarterback, even though the Bears are a very talented team in their own right, they have a rookie quarterback, and they are in arguably the toughest position in football, whereas the Falcons have one of the easiest strengths of schedule in the NFL. Now, I don't want to put a ton of stock in that because it's based on last year's results. Almost every team in the NFL is significantly different than it was last year. So the way I saw it was, the Falcons were probably going to be the better team. And although the Matthew Judon situation did get ugly, he's still been here for the past 3 years. He's been the face of your organization in the post-Tom Brady era. Like, the website still has him. There's multiple spots in the building where Matthew Judon
jerseys everywhere coming
Judon jerseys everywhere. He's prominently displayed all over the walls inside Gillette Stadium in the Patriots building. So I thought that this was more of the Patriots, in part trying to do right by Judon, maybe trying to make sure that they also, Alex Barth, when we spoke to him about this, made a great point. You also want to have strong relationships with agencies and being able to not just maybe send Matthew Judon to a place where he's not going to be able to maybe be a contender quite as soon. That was just my read on it.
Sure.
And then when you mentioned Kyle Brandt, he mentioned that trading away Judon makes it seem like the Patriots don't know what they're doing in this rebuild. I feel like that's short-sighted, especially because the 33rd team reported today that Matthew Judon simply didn't want to be in New England anymore. These sides were on very different ends of the spectrum on what kind of contract would be fair for a very long time. You can say that the Patriots should have figured this out quicker. Good thing it did work out for both sides in the end.
Right.
But if Matthew Judon didn't want to be here, it made the most sense for a rebuilding organization, especially after a bit of the ugliness that happened, in the summer, to move on from Judon, give him a chance to have a successful season, make his payday, get a fresh start, and then also for the Patriots to have a fresh start from this saga and be able to move forward with the guys that they extended, re-signed, and wanted to keep around. I thought it made the most sense, and I still think the trajectory of this team is building for the future, which the Matthew Judon move was. You get
Absolutely.
a third-round pick, which long-term is probably going to be more valuable than even if they had signed Matthew Judon to some 2-year deal. Then the weaponizing of the offense, which we saw through the draft, through them trying to get Calvin Ridley and Brandon Ayuk, and then leaning on their defense. Obviously not as easy without Christian Barmore or Matthew Judon, but you got guys like O'Shane Ximenez. You got guys like up front, Daniel Aquale coming back, Christian Gonzalez on the back end, maybe making life a little bit easier on the defensive front. So I still think this is a team whose philosophy and strategy is pretty obvious. Judon just throws a slight wrench into that short term, but for a long-term gain.
Yeah, for sure.
Whew, that was a lot for me.
It became even more abundantly clear last night that this is, and I've said it, but a team that's sort of building for 2025 and beyond. And not that 2024 is a throwaway, and we're not going to tank or we're not going to do all that stuff. But they need to keep both in mind, right? They need to try and win now, but they also need to try and build for the future. And clearly, they weren't going to get anything done with Matthew Judon. If Atlanta is a place that he would have rather been, great. I still think that, as far as the picks go, Chicago is a volatile team right now where they have, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze as weapons at wide receiver, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift, what have you.
I think Cole Kmet's a backup now, honestly. I saw some reports saying that now he might lose his top job.
What do they have?
I don't know, honestly. I'm not locked in. I just saw it and was like, oh, Cole Kmet. That's the guy that JT O'Sullivan doesn't like very much.
Interesting. Anyway, Caleb Williams did have a nice throw to Cole Kmet in the preseason game. Caleb Williams, obviously a rookie quarterback, looks to be pretty promising. Regardless, I think that they have potential to be pretty good this year and that Atlanta could be worse. But regardless, 2025 team and beyond, and it's clear that rebuild is here. So.
Process over production in 2024. I think you maybe look at it that way because they're not making a deep playoff run. Maybe they make the playoffs if you get a great run game and your rookies step up. But, realistically, I don't think anybody expects this to be a team that really makes a deep run.
Exactly. And, that's kind of where we're at. I went on my rant last night already. We're telling fans to kind of relax and, hold still and let this thing play out because it is a new regime. And tonight, tonight's game against the Eagles will probably show that just as much. So we're going to get into all of it. We're going to talk about the quarterbacks. We're going to give you guys some players to watch. But before we do, quick word from our friends over at Game Time. We'll be right back.
Dog days of summer here in Boston, which means it's time to get to some games over at Fenway Park. This baseball season, I'm using Game Time to land my Red Sox tickets. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which means getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. It's super easy. You just open the app, click Sports, and the games will be right there for you. Right now, you can get tickets to the Rollin' Red Sox for as low as $11. You can even buy parking for the game and check out your seat view right in the app. With Game Time, you can save up to 60% by buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy shows, theaters, and more. Get the lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. If you do it now, you might even be able to get into Gillette Stadium. Come hang out in the pouring rain with me and Tayler here as Patriots. Yeah, get ready to take on those Eagles. So speaking of that, speaking of where this game is headed, I want to bring up the Albert Breer report today. Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated reported that all 4 quarterbacks set to play for New England tonight. He said that the plan right now is for Jacoby Brissett to play the first quarter, Drake May to play the second quarter, into the third quarter, take the turn at halftime, and then it'll be Joe Milton followed by Bailey Zappi. So that's sort of the the depth chart we've seen over the last several weeks here. It's become clear that I think Joe Milton is sort of the third guy over Bailey Zappi. But I think the big news here is that we're going to see a lot more Drake May. May played only 7 plays last week, just 1 drive, went 2 of 3 for, I believe, 19 yards. And then they sat him down and kind of, really kept those training wheels off. He didn't see the field at all. Judon Mayo, after the game, said that was the plan all along, said that, the offensive line had a little bit to do with it. But now it seems clear that they're going to give this guy some real run tonight. Now, first and foremost, what do you expect from May with the shuffled offensive line around? We know that Vidarian Lowe has been out there, but Caden Wallace might have looked better, and there's been an up and down there. But also, the weather now. Do you think that plays a factor? Because they didn't mention it last week that it was a factor, but I think it's pretty clear that that might have been a sort of a last-minute decision with Drake May being his first NFL game. So thoughts on – I'll give you the floor for kind of the quarterbacks overall and what you make of tonight's game.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me with Drake May is how much time is he going to get behind the starting offensive line? He didn't get any during the joint practice with the Eagles, which we thought he might because it was a controlled setting. But now we're getting in a position where maybe he gets a drive or 2 with the starters, maybe not all of them, like David Andrews and Mike Nwenu could potentially rotate out. Then you sub in Nick Leverett and maybe like Layden Robinson or Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
But still, you're talking about him potentially getting significant snaps behind a backup offensive line that really, really struggled in the joint practices. We keep bringing up the 2-minute period where Drake May couldn't even get a throw off because he was under such constant duress. I don't really love the idea of in this setting or putting him at risk that much behind, again, just not a very good offensive line. I guess the Eagles are still a quality opponent, so it's not like even when you get towards some of those more reserved players, they're not going to have talent. So I don't love that idea necessarily, but I do like that we are going to see extended periods of Drake May going against another opponent in live game action. He mentioned in practice some of the plays that, in that 2-minute period specifically, that ended in sacks for us. He mentioned that in a live game, he'd probably try to make time, extend plays, run, or do what have you, that you don't really want to be doing in practice because you're trying to stay on schedule. So I still think we're going to get a lot of things to take away from this performance, but I still just don't love the fact that Drake May is at risk behind a poor offensive line. Hopefully he gets a couple of drives with the top unit, but, TBD.
I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most with May is that, that the new play, not new playability, but extending the playability, right? Where, 1, 2, 3 is gone, and then what do you do from there? You break the pocket, you kind of run your flood routes and kind of, your emergency, I guess, situation where, he can make something out of nothing. And you're right, we haven't been able to see that yet, obviously, because he's in the red jersey. And, we mentioned the sacks that happened on Tuesday where it's 10, 15-plus sacks because he's in – now, granted, the offensive line wasn't good, but he is also in a red jersey, and he has no ability to really make those plays. And that's what May's bread and butter was at North Carolina, where, crap hits the fan, he makes something out of nothing, throws a 50-yard ball to Tez Walker in the breadbasket and scores for 6. So, that's the stuff where – we will hopefully be able to see that now that you can't really, take that away in practice. I guess the whole thing with the weather tonight, and that's sort of become a talking point because of how bad the weather was bad last week. Then May doesn't play. It's not looking good right now, as we know. Even if it stops raining, the field's going to be, slippery and wet and crappy with the turf out there. Are you really putting him in that much bubble wrap again, where it's the Eagles and they're good and the offensive line stinks? And I get it because you don't want to, hinder the plan moving forward, but is there sort of a too much of a nervousness here if they don't put him out there again. Because, again, now it's been reported that May is going to play. Then all of a sudden, the weather comes through, and now it's like they're just completely bubble wrapping him, and they're too scared of putting him out there. Because at some point, he has to see the field. He has to play in these kind of conditions. You're talking about the New England Patriots here. He's going to have to come out and play in a lot worse if they think they're going to, be hanging more banners out here in the winter, in January, come February. So, like, I guess my question is, maybe not even my question. What are your thoughts on that? Like, am I crazy?
Just him playing in the weather.
Yeah.
I think if they significantly pull back on how many snaps he plays, yeah, that's a little bit too much. Because it feels like they've
they
been.
Should just get him out there and play.
Yeah, I mean, it's felt at least externally that they've been a bit conservative with him. But Alex Van Pelt reportedly has a plan, so I'm willing to let this play out. Although I do have my questions, and I want to get those out so that, however this does end up playing out, we can go back and at least say, okay, that's what we thought, and this is what they did, whether we're right or wrong. So definitely don't want to see, like, if he just ends up playing 2 or 3 drives, and that would be very disappointing. But at the same time, if it's so bad out here that the quality of reps that he's getting, where, like, we saw last week where Jacoby Brissett had the ball slip out of his hands on his first attempt. The next one was, underthrown to Tyquan Thornton, which may have had to do with the weather, maybe not. If you're seeing, like, he can't even really hit guys, it is still bad because this is Gillette Stadium and you're going to have to deal with inclement weather. But in some of those games, we've seen the Patriots aren't afraid to turn to their run game, maybe put less onus on their quarterback because it's so much harder to succeed in those conditions. So don't pull back too much. But if you end up seeing, maybe 1 or 2 drives less than you would at Drake May, I don't think it's the end of the world.
I get it. I do just think that you mentioned the plan that Van Pelt has and that they've sort of detailed this out where from the very beginning that it was reported by Mass Live when Mark and Chris were out at the Combine where they put together their intel and realized, rookie quarterback, veteran, sit him down. If it's Drake May, ease this in, Packer way. Like, all that stuff is all well and good, but if you have this detail-oriented plan and this is how we want to do it, right, and we're going to stick to the plan no matter what, unless it starts to sprinkle a little bit outside, that doesn't sit well with me. Like, you got to put him out there. But I also see on the other side where if it's, like, absolutely downpouring where you can't even see in front of you, there's no, like, that's not quality reps either. That's not real football. If they're going to just run the football anyway, don't bother having him out there and, slipping and, doing something he shouldn't. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think everyone, including, myself and everyone who does come out here tonight, is looking forward to see Drake May. And it's been reported by Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer that he will see the second quarter into potentially the third quarter.
Also think that'll mean we'll see him with all the young receivers, which would be kind of nice too. Probably going to get a lot of Polk, a lot of Baker, and a lot of Kayshon Boutte with Drake May, so that should be fun.
Yeah, so we'll get into all that. We'll talk about some players to watch. But first, a quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active users. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the action daily with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50. It's guaranteed. Think Tyreek Hill will get more than 90.5 yards in week 1. Aaron Jones, more than 66.5 yards. Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. It's the best way to win real money this football season, so head over to Prize Picks today. Again, download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a deposit match bonus up to $100. That is code CLNS on Prize Picks for a deposit match bonus up to $100. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, thank you to Prize Picks again, code CLNS over there. And maybe you could put together a lineup tonight. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll tweet one out for you later on before the game starts. So let's do players to watch quickly before we get out of here. Trying to keep it relatively quick. I keep looking back because I'm worried that we're going to get hit by a freaking wind or rain cloud or something. But I guess I'm going to go first, and I'll take Josh Uche as sort of my #1 player to watch here. And I wrote about it in my piece this morning on CLNSmedia.com, just where, look, Matthew Judon is now gone. Uche signed that 1-year deal with this team this offseason, sort of a prove-it deal, probably thinking that he would be opposite Matthew Judon as sort of that edge rusher. And we saw 2 years ago Uche thrived with that. 11.5 sacks, had one of his best years. Last year, doesn't play as well. Comes in here, again, signs the prove-it deal, speaking with us, saying that he thinks he's a more of a fit in DeMarcus Covington's defense. He can kind of be unleashed more. And now he loses the guy on his opposite side, on his bookend. So there's going to be more attention on him. Maybe he's the one seeing the double teams instead of Matthew Judon. Now, we'll see what happens. He wasn't obviously great last year, but I think it's important just to, look at that edge rusher position as a whole. We'll get to some other ones in a second, but I think Uche sort of now being the leader in the room because him and Jennings kind of together, but Uche sort of popped earlier. Zimenez is still new to the room, I guess, and so I don't know how much he'll play, but I think it's worth noting, again, that Josh Uche's job in this defense has been elevated a little bit more, and now with not seeing the double teams on Judon, it's going to get that much harder for him.
Yeah, and I'll build on that. My guy is O'Shane Zimenez.
Okay.
Like you mentioned, Joshua Uche is going to be vital to this Patriots pass rush, but I think when it comes to who's going to line up opposite him, there's going to be a whole lot of Keon White. But Keon White is a versatile guy who they're also going to play inside. So in those situations where you have Josh Uche on one edge and Keon White is a defensive tackle type, I think that's where Zimenez's role is really going to be, kind of like what we saw from Mack Wilson last year, where he could play some off-ball linebacker. I don't think Zimenez is going to do quite as much as that. I think he's going to be more of a pure edge in the scheme, but he gives you more flexibility on the edge on run situations, which I think is going to be big. And also the pass rush. He's not Matthew Judon. Like, it's like a Christian Barmore situation. No one on this roster by themselves is going to replicate what Matthew Judon was able to do, but Zimenez does give you some pretty solid pass rush. I actually looked it up on PFF. So Mack Wilson in his career has, I think, almost twice as high of a pressure rate, but O'Shane Zimenez actually has a higher pass rush win rate, meaning that in those one-on-one situations, he's actually getting the dubs more often, even if it doesn't always translate to pressure. So it's going to be interesting to see how that transition looks. But again, O'Shane Zimenez was dominant last week. Hopefully he can do the same against a stout Eagles front, both with the first unit and the second.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to flip to the offensive side of the football, and I'm going to talk about the offensive line. And two guys I am watching very closely tonight is obviously Vidarian Lowe and Caden Wallace. That sort of left tackle competition, if you will. It sounded like it was a competition early on in camp. They rotated it through a lot. We've talked about it here ad nauseum on the show, but it was really, it looked like might have been Caden Wallace's job to lose at one point when they put that, that first five together with him on the left side. They looked really solid. They went off of it, and it's pretty much been Vidarian Lowe ever since. Now, there's been some theories and thoughts that maybe they're splitting it up to make Brissett's job easier and Drake May's job easier at the same time, and that really Caden Wallace will end up moving in. We'll see what happens, but if Tuesday's practice has anything to do and, kind of shows you anything about this offensive line, it's so that it's not really that good at all. And Vidarian Lowe is the left tackle. It's the most important position. Now, look, Lowe has been okay. I think you pointed that out a lot, where he's better on the left side than he is the right side. But it still is just, it's not that good, right? The product is just not there.
Line,
10-plus sacks in Tuesday's practice. So I want to see both those guys, and if Wallace can come in after, put it this way, say it's a train wreck like it was on Tuesday, and then Wallace comes in and it looks okay, you have to make a serious consideration and think, okay, maybe we should switch this up. And I know that Coach Mayo, Gerard Mayo said, during one of the first weeks of camp that they want to kind of have their first offensive line set up after the second preseason game.
Yep.
So this is kind of it. This is the end of the open tryout that we thought was happening there. So I'm curious to see how those guys play out against an Eagles front that is very good. Like on a surface, again, that's going to be very slippery. It's going to be tough to kind of keep those guys at bay.
Continuing the thing with the offensive line, my guy for number 2 is Layden Robinson, a guy who played really well last week, better than I even expected. Also had a good practice against the Eagles from what we've heard from our colleagues in one-on-one situations. So with him, I don't like the idea of moving Mike Nwadu to tackle. I don't like it at all.
Yeah.
I'd rather have him as that Pro Bowl caliber guard with Chooks as an average replacement level starter. But if they like the situation better with Nwanu at tackle, then you have to at least give some consideration to Layden Robinson sliding inside of that right guard spot if he's looking like one of your best offensive linemen. Gerard Mayo has said several times they want their best 5 out there, and at some point, if that ends up being Layden Robinson, is better than Chooks, or you want to move Chooks around, whatever, it has to be at least considered. So I'm going to be looking for Layden Robinson to maybe make a stake for sliding into the top offensive line rotation.
Doug Codd put out a tweet this afternoon where he was like, I don't know if we'll see this exact lineup tonight, but this is sort of an offensive lineup to look forward to into the future with the Patriots. And it was the left tackle being Caden Wallace, left guard being City So. Left guard maybe was Cole Strange, but the other, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. It wasn't Cole Strange because I had the right guard wrong.
We can self-plug. We'll self-plug because I've been saying for a long time,
Yeah.
like since the draft, and I've held firm that long-term, if you look at the Patriots' offensive line room, most logically it's going to be Caden Wallace left tackle, Sidney So left guard, center unknown because obviously David Andrews' situation, Jake Andrews' situation, we have no idea. But then right guard Layden Robinson and right tackle Mike and
Exactly.
That would
That's
make
where I
the
was
most.
getting.
Yeah, no, that would make the most sense. So if that's what they think the plan is still long-term, then accelerating that would make some level of sense.
Right. So I think it again definitely kind of building off that. Layden Robinson obviously someone to watch because he had a good game last week, and maybe he can build off it today. So I'll give you one more. I'll give you Jalen Polk on offense, and I'll defer to you for somebody else. We'll go with that guy.
Yes. Okay.
I'm gonna go Jalen Polk. I think it's gonna be. He has the opportunity to have a massive game tonight. Not in terms of like yardage or like. He's not going to go for 10 catches for 100 yards, but he can show that he can be a starter in this offense almost immediately. He can come in, especially with Kendrick Bourne being out. With him, Pop Douglas, KJ Osborne, that can kind of be your main three. Start. Yeah. One. What is that? Is that the 1, 2, 3? No, that's who's one.
Right
yeah,
now
1, 2,
it's
3.
yeah.
That would be the 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So that's what we want.
The dream team.
Yeah. This whole time, that's kind of what we've been striving for. So I think tonight, look, if he gets more reps than he did, last week, and can build a rapport with not only Jacoby Brissett, with Drake May as well, come out here. Look, he was cooking some of the Eagles in one-on-ones the other day. Bring that to 7-on-7, which he did bring it to 11-on-11s, which, I mean, you couldn't really glean anything from 11-on-11s. But come out here, game day, and watch your second-round pick shine. I think Jalen Polk is poised for a pretty big night tonight. We'll kick it to you for one final player to watch before we get out of here.
Yeah, my last guy, Jeremiah Farms Jr. Like it's going to be a committee approach to replace Matthew Judon. I think it's going to be similar, obviously, with Christian Barmore. Same thing we've heard from the coaches. Daniel Iguodala, I think, is a solid player. He gives you pass rush, he gives you run defense. But in terms of size, one thing about him is he has trouble getting off blocks because he doesn't have very long arms. So that's your top guy to maybe replace some of Barmore's production. But one of my favorite candidates is also Jeremiah Farms because his hand technique has been fantastic, going even all the way back to last season. Another guy who gives you versatility, but I think better block shedding ability. So if Jeremiah Farms can really take a step forward in this defense and be a guy who carves out a more consistent role, I think it would be a big boost to a Patriots defensive front that doesn't really have a lot of proven guys to replace the stars that they may be without for, obviously Judon for the entire season and Barmore potentially an extended period of time as well.
I feel you. That is players to watch before tonight's preseason game against the Philadelphia Eagles. It's looking like it's starting to clear up here down in Foxboro. Our producer Amit turned off our spotlight because the sun is finally starting to come out. So depending on how the field dries, maybe we will end up seeing some Drake May tonight. So any final thoughts before we get out of here, Taylor, about tonight's game and what we should be looking for?
I'm geeked. More Drake May, May Day, all the May chance you want. We're actually going to see him for more than a drive today, so I'm pumped.
I'm envious of you being geeked because, like I said, to open the show, I'm nervous. The rain made it even more nervous. It kind of got scary out here. Now it's going away. We're going to see a lot of Drake May, so hopefully, fingers crossed, things go well for the Patriots' number 3 overall pick. We'll be back here on Patriots Press Pass following tonight's game for a post-game show. We'll have a Pats Nation nightly podcast, I believe, right after kickoff, and then we'll come on after media availability. So make sure you keep it here at Patriots Press Pass. Rate, review, subscribe to the channel, and we'll have some written work on the game as well over at CLNSmedia.com. So until post-game here for Patriots Daily, he's Tayler Kyles. I'm Mike Kadlick. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other, and we'll see you next time. Peace, y'all.